All right, welcome back. Now, Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, Christine Lagarde, was in the Nigerian capital of Abuja recently, where she met with President Muhammadu Buhari and had discussions with other top government officials and leaders of civil society as well as the business community. During her meeting with President Buhari, they discussed, among other things, the dwindling price of oil in the international oil market. Now, Ms. Lagarde later addressed a press conference at the presidential villa, saying she had a fruitful discussion with the president on the state of the Nigerian economy in the light of the dwindling oil prices. She praised the anti-corruption drive of the Buhari administration, pledging the IMF assistance in helping Nigeria recover its looted funds. Nigeria is working hard to improve its business environment, promote opportunities for growth in the private sector, and strengthen social cohesion, all areas where the government has an important role to play, she added. Now, let's take a listen to what she said further.
I was in Nigeria 4 years ago, and in 4 years, many things have changed. That has been the topic of our discussions with President Buhari and his team. If you look back 4 years ago, since that, a massive democratic change has occurred in this country, peacefully. Nigeria has become the largest economy in Africa, certainly the most populated and a very attractive market. But things have changed in a more complicated way, in the sense that the source of revenue for the government of Nigeria, which was predominantly oil, has seen its price divided by more than half. And the financing costs around are beginning to rise, if only because the economic situation in the United States is improved and interest rates will begin to rise. Added to which, emerging market economies are decelerating their growth and are no longer going to contribute the massive growth that they had contributed over time. So the demand addressed to commodity providers, be it of oil or otherwise, is probably going to be slightly reduced. So it's in that context of a great Nigeria, which is a leader in Africa, that we had this excellent discussion this morning with President Buhari. And we discussed the challenges ahead, stemming from the oil price reduction, the necessity to apply fiscal discipline, and the need to also respond to the population needs by addressing the medium-term necessity of improving competitiveness of Nigeria, and yet also focusing on the short-term fiscal situation, which requires that revenue sources be identified in order to compensate the shortfall resulting by the oil price decline. Now, oil in and of itself is not the major contributor to Nigeria's GDP. It's only about 14%. But it's a big source of revenue for the government. To those of you who wonder why the IMF Managing Director is visiting Nigeria, well, it's precisely to have a good discussion about these new objectives, these reforms, agendas that have been identified and supported by the President, and also to appreciate the impact that it will have on neighboring countries. Because when you have a very large economy like Nigeria, anything that it decides, any hardship that it faces, will actually have consequences around it. A team of economists is going to come next week, actually, to do what we call the Article 4, which is a review and an audit and a good discussion between partners, the IMF on the one hand, the country authorities on the other hand, to really assess whether the financing is in place, whether the debt is sustainable, whether the borrowing costs are sensible, and what strategy must be put in place in order to address challenges going forward.
All right, joining me now to shed more light on this visit and what it means for Nigeria is Tunde Adeyemi, financial analyst and managing director, Maven Asset Limited, an investment firm based in the Nigerian commercial capital of Lagos. Thank you very much, Mr. Adeyemi, for joining us on the program. Let me just start by asking you, what exactly does this visit by the IMF Managing Director, what does it mean for Nigeria?
Okay, let me put it this way. Firstly, you know, whenever you see any economy like Nigeria or any emerging economy going through a bold reform, you always expect a visit from the Bretton Woods, World Bank, and every other stakeholders. I think the key major thing is every other stakeholders in the Bretton Woods are already exercising some bits of panic, especially in the face of the recent reform by government, restrictions on forex, and a ban on some certain goods which is affecting some European countries. So we expect this to come. And also too, when the government is making the postulation that they're likely to borrow about ₦1 trillion to fund 2016 budget, that's about $10 billion. So we expect things like this to actually be on the burner. So that's one of the key major things why the MD of the IMF is here. And also too, at this particular level in government, it is very important for the IMF as a former stakeholder in the economy to actually come out with their plan and see how one way or the other, since the government is actually looking at making the country export friendly, you know, investment driven friendly, and also private sector led. So the IMF thinks it is time for them to actually come in now than later, which I think the visit is a wise decision by the head of the Bretton Woods now.
Now the IMF the IMF MD, I should say, actually said she is not in Nigeria to structure a loan for the country. Why did she have to say that?
I think it's a key major important thing because, you know, everybody believes anytime IMF pays you a visit is actually after its loan portfolio to see how they can either restructure what is already in there or actually lend you one. I think it just tried to douse a fear in the system that we are not here to discuss loan, but to look at your developmental issue, because we know Nigeria is going through a structural imbalance period, which is why it's a very wise decision to start its visit from there, because I know everybody's on their partner is IMF is here about loan. IMF is here to either restructure the loan that we are owing or actually bringing in a fresh loan. Sorry?
Something else the IMF president said, that in the coming weeks that the IMF will be, the IMF MD, I keep saying IMF president, we only have a World Bank president, but the head of the IMF is actually the managing director. Now, something else she said is that in the coming weeks that the IMF will be sending a team to Nigeria to carry out some kind of audit and all of that. Could you help us understand this? What exactly are they coming to audit? That they just have to come and audit to find out if, for instance, we have the necessary financing for the budget, and if we'll be able to access the loan that we want, and you know, and whether we'll be able to pay back, especially when you consider the fact that the IMF has come out to say it is not structuring a loan for Nigeria.
Okay, let me put it this way. In a simple nutshell, IMF is about funding. And funding does not really mean about borrowing a loan. It might be in the area of partnership as well too. I know this particular government is actually trying to play the cards with IMF. That is, we want you to come and partner our developmental needs and not really to actually give us a loan directly. And when you're talking about partnership on developmental basis, it is very wise for you to send your own due diligence team and team to be able to see what is the country putting on the table, because it's very, very important for you to be able to get to the fact that the country has what it takes to be able to partner or to be able to get the necessary funding required. I think that is the normal thing or normal phase in any business relationship. But since the IMF is here as well to partner as well too, they need to actually put together their own books and make sure they are dealing with the country will have the right things to actually make sure the fund they have in them receive the appropriate attention and returns required. And like you know, IMF fund is actually being an investment fund that is actually contributed by various countries. So she wants to make sure that before they actually make any partnership or any investment, that the country has what it takes to be able to repay back or also to be able to give proper return on investment to the various stakeholders. DEJI.
Now, something else I want to ask you. The IMF, as we know, does not enjoy a very good perception in Nigeria. Why do you think this is the case?
Number one, I think it's not really Nigeria. Almost every country that's actually have received one or two patronage from IMF does not give the IMF a very wonderful pass mark. In fact, everybody looks at them as if they are coming to wreck their economy. But the key major thing also too is that people have not been able to look at the various things that have been done in terms of what IMF has contributed. Now the challenge of us have also too, and I will have bring the people perspective, is the bespoke strategy IMF have adopted in various countries, which was not properly thought through. I mean, just like with an example, you are trying to put up a policy in Nigeria for Nigerians, and you are bringing somebody from somewhere else that does not even know what happened in Nigeria to run these things, and you see most of those policies does not stand the test of time, and one way or the other, because if you are going to come to Nigeria to do anything, you need to actually study very well the state of Nigerians. Do they have the needed capital, human capital, or the resources to be able to make the particular state to actually work then? You're not supposed to just throw the because it has worked in Japan or it has worked in North Korea. And over time, they already made a lot of problems, a lot of mistakes in every economy, not only in Nigeria. So when anybody hear of IMF, they believe is another austerity, is another cramping down on the economy, is another war on the other one. But one way or the other, analysts will tell you, if you look at most of this policy IMF is bringing to the table, they are fantastic policy, but it gradually fail at the execution phase. Bureaucratic, and even also too the kind of deployment that they also to release onto most of this project causes it to fail. So it's not only Nigeria, most of the part of the world always assert whenever the year IMF is always of woe. DEJI.
Okay, one last question before I let you go. The biggest talking point in the economy today is the value of the naira. I mean, it's really gone down against the dollar, and there have been calls in some quarters for the government to devalue, and the government has made it very clear that it does not intend to devalue, even though the IMF MD did not say she discussed that with the president, but we heard that topic actually came up, and that the IMF is in favor of a devaluation, but the Nigerian government has said it does not plan to devalue and will not do so. Let me get your take on this.
Okay, when you're talking about devaluation, to this particular point, I know IMF has been on this stance and World Bank has been on this stance for the past 6 years, that Nigeria need to just devalue their currency, the naira. And I'm going to stand with the president on this particular area, that the country is not right for devaluation. Analysts will tell you that if you're a full ground, is that devaluing the currency now is actually going to bring more problem than it ought to be, because the country has no basis, no stability to be able to handle the particular devaluation we are talking about. And that is one of the major problems most of us to have with the Bretton Woods and the World Bank and others, is that you need to actually study the economy properly. You need to actually study the dynamism, and also to the representative need to see, does this economy, can it withstand devaluation? I don't think Nigeria can withstand devaluation for now, because we have so much privileges, leakages in the system. Wastage, bureaucratic enough, is not even making us to be export driven. So for you to now go ahead and devalue the currency is like bringing the economy to a very major problem. Now, even so when the government is saying, no, we are looking at organic growth, let's see what we can do locally, because we are running a budget of $64 billion globally in Nigeria, averagely for the past 6 years. And we're not seeing there's something must be wrong somewhere. So devaluation is not really the best way to go. Even under these circumstances, everybody will tell you by the books, devaluation is the answer. But I think I will stand on government on that particular position, that the country is not right for devaluation, because if you look at every single thing that we need to devalue the economic currency and make it to stabilize at a particular point, we have none of them existing. The country is not actually export driven. The country is not even competitively in investment driven as well too. The various things that we have in the economy does not support retaining of relevant funding in Nigeria. So much wastages still goes on. That is why when the government is saying that one way or the other, it's going to be arch economy now, especially for the trading partners. But the question is, the country is not right for devaluation now. Let's leave the books alone and look at what is actually on the ground. DEJI.
All right, Mr. Adeyemi, thank you very much for your thoughts, and thank you very much for joining us on the program. Well, that's it on the program. If you want to watch it again, it's simple. Go to our website, tv360nigeria.com. You'll find the program there and lots more. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel. That is youtube.com/TV360Nigeria. Do subscribe to get latest videos and updates. And you can also follow us on Google Plus at TV360Nigeria, or like us on Facebook. The address is facebook.com/TV360online. You can also follow us on Twitter. Our handle is at TV360online. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again next week.